or to the whole district about your improper citation or something, so
Yes.
you admitted, I mean, plagiarism is such a big word, you admitted to not
I admit
properly
to not
citing
properly
a web.
citing.
And as, I don't know, Kara, if you've done any, or John has done academic honor code at UGA, we go through this a lot as professors with students that like to lift things off of the internet. And it's pretty hard, I don't know what your opinion is, John and Kara, but it's been very hard to enforce that in the age of the internet in terms of trying to impress upon students lifting things from the web and not citing where you get them. And I've lost almost every case I've taken there, which is sort of frustrating to me. We want to teach people that they need to cite where they get their sources, but I appreciate that it's a gray area, I guess, but you did send that memo, so to some level you did agree to tell the rest of the community that you had used the quote.
Correct.
So my daughter's a journalist, and I have this conversation often, and I teach her the Comp 1000 at Athens Tech, and when we're building research papers. And so there are certain things that you do cite that are, again, authored things, and where people actually claim ownership to that. But then there's certain things that fall into this gray area, as Tim has explained to me. And so it's kind of like you found a definition in Wikipedia. You don't, you might say Wikipedia, you might not. You found it on some other internet search thing.
Well,
You got a definition, you may not.
I think ideally we work towards citing appropriately when we borrow from the
I think
internet.
that's why the
a
letter
good thing to do, but I don't think it rises to the level of a complaint against the superintendent, is my opinion. It's not a big enough deal to hang this on. I may regret saying that, but I don't think I'm right.
Okay, and I guess to me, I mean, it's not, you know, it may not rise to the level of PSC, but to me, it is a big deal. I have been taken through the ringer as a high school teacher, assigning research papers, and I've had county commissioners tell me it's not your job to reprimand students on plagiarism. That's what they do in college. I've had judges, you know, talk very disrespectful to me because their daughter was accused of, you know, I mean, she plagiarized. You know, there were a couple lines and she plagiarized. And so back before pre-internet, I would follow the kids in the library and I would look at their sources. And I spent hours and hours and hours and hours doing that because I felt like it was my responsibility.
And I totally agree with
Okay,
you.
so
I totally
let me finish, because I don't, we had an interpretation from our legal counsel who said, well, you know, maybe the guy where Dr. Means got the information from, maybe he plagiarized it.
That's not what I said.
Well, okay, I was trying to find your letter, but it was how I read it. You know, and so I think that you know, but even in Dr. Means' letter here that he sent to the staff, which I am glad he did that, you know, he does say, he said, I should have cited it, you know, so there was a citation to be used.
No, sir. I don't know what citation could have been used, but if the claim was that it wasn't cited, that's accurate. I don't know what I could have cited. And I guess the only other thing I would say, Mr. Davis, is there's a difference between plagiarizing, not citing something, and it being an ethical violation.
I agree.
And so I take great
agree.
offense that someone claims that that's a professional ethical violation. There's lines, and I just don't think it's a professional.
It's not a PSC business. I agree.
I don't think it's a professional ethical violation.
I agree with you there. I just don't think that as a body of educators, I mean, people make mistakes, you know, and I don't think that should be minimized, but people make mistakes, and so we move on. And I don't think it's a PSC charge. But I do think for us to say, well, it's not really that big of a deal, I think I don't think that's, you know, that's not what we do. and I don't even think Dr. Means is advocating that. So so, with that, I'm done with it, but I just don't feel like that, I think it's too easy to just say it's simply an attack, which I understand how you feel, Dr. Means. But it's like anything else. I know I said something at a public meeting 2 weeks ago that everybody went, whoa! I wish I hadn't said it. I made a mistake. The way I phrased it at a public forum was totally incorrect, and people latched onto it. It's not what I meant, but I said it, and I've gotta own it, and I've been walking it back ever since. So, I just think that needs to be out there. So I've had my piece.
Fair enough, and in response to you, I walked back a little bit of what I just said loosely, which expresses some frustration with even my own standards of holding students accountable to their words and their citations, and being pretty much told many times that my standards were higher than the students that were expected to follow, which is surprising to me, but it is the system.
So in the
we're in.
research institution, I would be very disturbed by that.
Well, I think, like, for me, I would agree that the standards that are listed here specifically are 4, 6, and 9, right? In the original letter that was sent to us. And again, like, with the job of determining if the code of ethics has been violated, which is a different question, whether we want it to be or not. It's sort of a different question of like, okay, well, how do we, like, what is honesty? Again, like when we look at the code of ethics and things like that, you're really fitting, you're trying to take these examples that were listed in the complaint and saying, okay, is it our interpretation that this is like a violation of honesty? Or is this a violation of dealing with conduct? Or, and I mean, I'm inclined to agree, but I've shared with you all before, my selfish goal is to move forward with some resolution on a lot of formal things that I feel like are distracting us from other issues that we need to attend to. So.
The only other clarification that and I think it's already out there. I'm just double checking. The only place that I saw in terms of the Avid payments was in a letter that Jared and Linda put out on April 29th, where it was talked about 500 and 700 respectively. And presumably you got that information from Dr. Means, and presumably Dr. Means said that's the sum total of
Right.
what we're talking about.
Other thoughts?
I'll just say, I have similar thoughts to Greg, and I think while I don't think that it is something that rises to the level of an ethics violation that should be reported to the PSC, for me to say that it doesn't meet the definition of plagiarism is hard, because I think that I think if we technically look at the definition of plagiarism, it does. That being said, like I said, I agree with Greg in that it was acknowledged, it was apologized for, it was moved on. So, but like Greg said, it just made me a little uncomfortable to say, oh, it's fine, it's not really plagiarism, because then that goes against what I know is plagiarism. Not really new information, but just
Other thoughts?
What are next steps?
So I think
Oh.
oh, sure, sorry, Dr. Knoxville.
Just going back to the letter asked, please investigate. So I think if there is any response to PSC from this board, it would have to reference an investigation.
And I think that's within our, that's sort of our decision to determine what we consider an investigation. So we've referenced a few different artifacts, communications, responses. One of the things that was clear, we go back to some of the questions that were answered, that the PSC is not going to, they made it clear that, first of all, we don't determine any like level of consequence, and they don't tell us how to investigate. And so our operational definition of, you know, what an investigation looks like is within our, that's within our power to determine. If we feel that we've gathered enough information and enough perspectives to determine that an investigation has, enough information has been gathered and an investigation has been done for us to make a determination. So yes, you're correct, it does say, investigate. I think the board determines what that is, and if we are, you know, we wanna say we have gathered information, that's within our power to do so. They didn't give us a specific definition of that, or process for what that looks like. He did share, you know, if it's you all, if it's your legal counsel, if it's somebody else, so that's still within our determination.
I'd actually write a letter about that investigation from my perspective, but it would just be my perspective. And I thought that also in that conversation, we heard him say that, you know, this is something you can give to your attorney to look at. And so we've done that. So is there something we're missing in terms of what you would consider an investigation? John?
Yeah, speaking as a scientist, I think so. I think you have someone that's impartial, that checks things out. That's what investigation is.
I have a problem citing, and I wish I could find it, because I thought I had it, but, you know, you cite our attorney's investigation, which he said it wasn't an investigation, his opinion. But there were things in that opinion that in some ways I was more bothered by than the original stuff, so.
Could I ask what?
Well, I'm trying to find
I
it,
think
you
it
know.
was verbal
I have
at the
co-
meeting, wasn't
Huh?
it? It was
No,
verbal? Oh, did he give you
no, he
something?
gave something in,
That was another
something in
word.
writing. And I know where it was, but, I just can't, I don't have it in front. I got all this other stuff, I just don't have that.
I think that having the legal opinion is a part of it, but I don't think it's the whole thing, because I think that that's a legal opinion and this is a question, it's an ethical question. And so this is where I was when we talked about it before. I think the legal part is certainly important, but I don't think it covers everything. And then the next part of it became that we're not an ethics committee. And so for us there are people who, that is their job, and it's not ours. So I don't know how we do this.
One, I think that goes back to is within our, our purview to decide like what that's going to look like. And ultimately, like going back to the actual, all of the exhibits or examples that were included, those were specific actions. But again, we're being asked to determine if a violation was made against,
The standards.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
standards, so we're not even being asked
If this
this
is true.
right.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, the wording is, if the PSC receives a complaint about the superintendent, the PSC wants the Board of Education to be informed and to make a determination of whether it rises to the level of PSC involvement. The board can choose how to investigate, which could be through the board attorney or evaluation process or other options.
And
That's
I'm-
your response back, right?
I'm sorry?
I want to make sure where I got that.
What now?
That was what they said to your question.
Right.
Is that their writing or your writing? That's your
there,
writing?
yeah, from those conversations.
It was a phone call.
So I just want us to get to that place where we close this tonight if we can, and if we can't, then we need to know what are the next steps that we need to do.
Agree.
And let's not belabor it. I think again, if we think we have, a need for an investigation, then somebody needs to define how that happens and who that happens with and where does that go. And if we see that we are at that place where we think that we don't need that, then we need to know that. I would rather not come back next month or whenever we have the next meeting and redo this conversation. This one needs to be a clear direction out of it. I think.
So the other thing you wrote was, the investigator will talk with the superintendent and get his side of the story. If there is a decision to sanction, the accused will get a letter allowing 30 days to respond. Upon appeal, it goes to the state attorney general office and it goes before the administrative law judge. So, I mean, we've done,
If the board decides to sanction,
Right.
we decide, and then I understand that we don't have that authority, is that what I heard?
Yeah, and that's,
So,
that's.
we don't even know where that came
PSC,
from.
yeah, should have been like if the board decides that there's a violation, that would be within the PSC's,
Purview to do those
Yeah.
things.
I mean, personally, I think that we are at a place where, I'm comfortable saying that this is done. Particularly as we have to answer the question about whether the code of ethics has been violated. I think we have we probably have as much information as we are going to have as a board. And again, for me, part of this decision is looking at the information that's included about plagiarism, about Avid, and even more so, I probably have some stronger feelings about the dissertation. I think that crossed the line, me personally. And I just think when you get into trying to figure out if a person did a dissertation and whether that's just outside of, when we talk about ethics violations being outside of our purview, that in fact is like, how do we continue gathering that? You know, we know it's a ProQuest now, but I just think I'm okay being at the place where this is closed and considering it resolved.
And for those same reasons, thank you for saying so clearly, and the anonymous nature of this is concerning to me. I don't have any idea who we're trying to appease or what we're trying to do. I do know that we have made it a very difficult situation for our superintendent to do the work in the district. Quite frankly, with things like this hanging over his head, and I'm ready for us to make sure that we don't carry any of this into 2020.
I think that would be the goal for many of our anonymous, you know,
Yes.
complaints, ideally,
I
but
think
we're
we're
just
trying
talking
to
about,
move forward. I'd
we
like
were
to
talking
see
about.
I just have decided to not say anything, I just won't say anything to this, but I'm just wondering, is the advanced ed complaint, is that anonymous? Was that anonymous?
From what I can recall, yes.
Okay.
And so it goes back to having these two sort of formal things, although that one is not, you know, on the agenda. But yeah, certainly your point is like these two things that are unknowns. And both of them.
My understanding from advanced ed was that
Well, yeah, but I'm just
they
saying.
know who the person who filed the complaint is, but they didn't share it with me.
Okay.
So I think it's Dr. Carter, Claudia Carter, she's aware of she's aware of the identity of that person.
Which I guess it would be similar to the PSC, well, I guess the PSC knows the attorney, not necessarily, we don't know what, we haven't asked that specifically, but.
But just to answer the question.
I guess we can ask the attorney if he turned the names over to the PSC. Because to me, it is comparable. You know, because either way, we don't know who is making all these allegations.
And I just feel it hinders, all of this is been such a distraction this year. You know, I really am concerned about my community, about serving children, and it's just, I can't even express how disappointed I am. And I just don't, you know, I just don't even want to speak to this. You know, I stated, I mean, in the beginning, I thought that it was, you know, unfair when that first happened. You know, but, you know, the same feelings that, you know, that are expressed today, I said, feel the same way. I feel that my name has been dragged. I mean, there was a response, which wasn't anonymous. I mean, so I just feel like it's just a lot of back and forth, and I'm ready for us to move forward and get to the business of these children, because we have all this data out here, and I can tell you, I'm ashamed to say, I can't tell you if the data is true or not, from dealing with so many mailings and so many emails and phone calls about all of this stuff, that I can't tell you anything about our student achievement at the level that I should be able to. I'm just really hurt right now by all of this.
One, I think, like, you know, one of the things that I really hope, and again, we're speaking to things, some things within our control, and then other things that are outside of our control. But we do have these things lingering, and I'm hoping that we all commit to moving forward and resolving complaints, formal complaints that I still believe can simply be resolved by conversation. And so even after moving through this, I know this is our agenda for tonight, but we will still at some point have to address another anonymous complaint. And my hope then is that we move forward with similar efforts to resolve these things as, you know, efficiently as possible.
As far as this particular item, one of the sayings, and I think I've said it to you before, is that I don't think good decisions get made after the 2-hour mark of any meeting. And so my personal preference would be not to make a decision tonight on this. We've heard actually some new information tonight. So my personal preference would be to wait on this and do it the way we would normally do it with a work session, where this comes up at the regular meeting for a vote or whatever action.
And my understanding is that would be the case. So this is more like processing.
I was hearing that things were going to be decided tonight. That's what I was hearing.
I was hoping that we would have a direction to make, and so again, I just don't wanna have this whole conversation again in 2 weeks. At this point, we have some new information. I would want us to then be cognizant of that new information and have a position ready by the next meeting and not have to rehash it.
But I think it's fair to say that there was some differences as far as like how people define plagiarism. But I think that there is, at least what I'm hearing, is some desire to move forward, some desire to resolve this, and maybe not a consensus, but almost the majority, minus our two here, not feeling that this rises to the level of an ethics violation.
It's just the plagiarism. There it is, right there, and I've got the citation here. So I mean, again, it's not an ethical, it doesn't rise to PSC levels.
And
But it's
that's
kind of
all-
like
that's
when we
all
start,
PSC is
when we start,
asking.
but when we start saying that we have different interpretations, I mean, it is what it is. You know, so I just hate to minimize something at the same time getting through it and recognizing it doesn't belong in the lap of the PSC. I just, you know,
So the only question then, right, is it the PSC thing that we're dealing with?
yes, that's what we're dealing with. But when people start saying it doesn't really rise, you know, plagiarism doesn't rise to, you know, I don't know if it ever would rise to PSC, you know.
But to
But-
this point, what PSC is asking us is not what our definition is.
Right.
It's not asking
Right. You're right.
what
You're
citations
right.
we
You're
use,
right.
what format we use. They're asking, given this evidence, does it rise to that level?
Right.
Of those ethics
Right.
violations?
I
And what
agree.
I'm
I
hearing,
agree.
even across those plagiarism, what is, what's not, you know, is that we don't
agree.
feel that it does.
And I'm done with it. I'm just gonna react almost instinctively when, because I've had scores of parents do that for a decade, so.
Maybe we could include in our discussion of norms, as we put our norms together, something about what we feel rises or doesn't.
I mean, I think we should, I mean, I'm fine with making a statement for the entire board, just basically read it to the public and saying, this is what we've concluded over the next 2 weeks. I'm fine with that. But part of that would be the saying that a mistake was made, it was,
Acknowledged.
and it was acknowledged soon after, and it doesn't rise to the,
This complaint doesn't rise.
right, right, so, but, I mean, to 1, 2, 3, I mean, it's not something that, you know, it's not, you know, that it's not plagiarism. That is my point.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, so I'm fine to acknowledge.
And I think it goes along, I know these are different sets of ethics codes, but, I mean, in my field, maybe in others' fields, if there's been a violation or even an assumption that there's a violation, typically the first step is to go to the person and say, hey, I interpreted this behavior as this, versus going to an ethics board and that ethics board considering that complaint.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think it has to be complicated how we do it. I think they just want to know, and we know we're not deciding tonight, we're not voting tonight, but it would be great as we move forward and consider all of this information when you all meet in 2 weeks, that we don't spend, you know, more time, trying to figure this out.
When we respond to the PSC, will we say, we have conducted an investigation? Do we have to show them evidence of an investigation?
They did not specify that. They want our answer to that question.
I guess the reason I asked that was I was wondering if it would be helpful for everybody to have it written out, sort of like what our investigation was and found, and the answers to these questions that people have. And then maybe that's something that we could vote on
Like the
at
response
the meeting.
itself that
Yeah,
says.
like, do we
Okay.
accept this response? And then everything will be written out there, and then that can be submitted.
And that answers their question.
Right.
Because again, they haven't asked us for any, you know, information other than the answer to this question.
As to the Avid thing, okay, something else I think we need to cite is the fact that in the contract, I mean, it does say that the superintendent shall devote his time and attention, energy to the business of the district, blah, blah, blah. The superintendent may temporarily continue his present consulting with the Indian Community School for Milwaukee so long as it does not interfere with his duties. And it says, for the purposes here within, consulting is defined as my work for which the superintendent, or any work in which the superintendent receives compensation exceeding $500 not including reimbursement for travel and everything. So there was some acknowledgement that there was work that was going to be continued after he, after Dr. Means came on board, okay? It wasn't, the Abbott thing was not listed there. And so, you know, in terms of what, again, the clearest explanation I've got so far is from Linda and from Jared, who said that one payment was 2016, the other was in 2017. The latter arranged prior to his employment with CCSD. And, you know, I think there's something that's not clear with me about how finishing up one piece of work was acknowledged in the contract, but this
The work
piece.
with Abbott is ongoing.
Huh?
Aren't you still using that product? Aren't you still, I mean, the work is continuing with Abbott. Not compensated work, but the work is still going on. So what are you asking? It's like previous affiliation.
No, I'm saying
Continue
in your work, you said that this is in your letter
Right.
with you and Jared, that the $700 was the latter arranged prior to his employment with CCSD. And if it was, then in my opinion, it should have been in the contract. Like the Indian Community School from Milwaukee was in the contract.
When Dr. Means came to us, the first thing he said the night that he came in was talking about Abbott and his work with Abbott and how he thought it would be great for our district. So again, I don't think we said, give us your list of the affiliations that you have and the things that you have to put in this contract.
But that.
Why is that a problem?
Well, and if I may interject.
Dr. Means is right here, so yeah.
If I may interject, they are asking us a question. Like, we don't, I do hear what you're saying, like maybe putting together all of the stuff that we have, that could be useful, certainly. But I want to encourage us not to get bogged down in all of the different, like, evidence that, you know, we'll put together, and that's great. I think it's good for maybe from a public standpoint to understand how we've arrived at our conclusion. But there are some aspects of that, I guess, that really are outside of our control at this point, if it were not in the contract. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it should have been, but if we are looking at the information that we have right now, the information that Jared and Miss Linda, the piece that they had on Abbott, we're looking at the response to the quotation that was made, and then the dissertation piece. I don't want us to go down this path of trying to, like, add so much that we get lost in this.
I don't either, but to me, part of the idea of an investigation is that you say.
Isn't that right? Didn't we say we're not doing an investigation?
And that's what we're asked to do. That's what we're asked to do in the letter. That's what we're doing now. I mean, we're not hiring anybody, but we're doing it ourselves. We're investigating.
Mr. Davis,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Worthy was made aware of my work with Abbott before I started working here. So per my contract, it states that I have to notify board leadership. And the board, if I'm going to engage in that work, the board leadership was informed.
That was Mr. Worthy and Sarah, not Jared. We came in on the investigation end of this.
And that's exactly what the contract states.
Yes.
My integrity doesn't feel good with that. I'm sorry. I can't.
It says
I mean, I just feel, I'm sorry, my integrity doesn't feel good with that. I mean, Linda, you like kind of attacking him, but he's asking what's in the contract. I don't feel like he's going down a long road. I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong, but what is what is a conflict of interest? What is, you know, what would that be for any employee, like, to tell the board chair, but the board doesn't know that this exists? That's what, you know, is an indicator of why we have problems right now.
Dr. Maddox, I was not an employee officially yet. I was not the superintendent, so I notified the board leadership. If or when the board leadership informed the rest of their colleagues, that's not my job. And so I did my due diligence and they were informed.
Okay, what this says, Dr. Means, and I'm not saying, I mean, you signed it, but you didn't write it, this contract. And it says, any other consultation, this is after talking about the Indian Community School from Milwaukee, any other consultating by a superintendent must be expressly approved by the board.
Correct. But if I've submitted it to the board leadership, I can't make the entire board approve it.
That's fair.
And so that's not on demand means, that's definitely not an ethical violation
No.
on my part.
It's not ethical
That's all I'm
Okay.
saying.
Okay. So, but I do think that, and I do accept what Dr. Means said about that. I think it falls on the era of the board. I think the board leadership needs to take, even though only one of them is here now, that is an error in the contract.
Well, again, but, okay, so I hear what you're saying, now my question is this, because you're not gonna be here on the 21st, who is drafting this, thing that you're doing?
So I was getting ready to say, I think that it's within, and this is within my superpowers, is, if I could sort of, I think we can have maybe 2 people create a draft letter that highlights.
Huh?
We have a board secretary and an attorney.
I don't think it's going to be that,
It's not gonna be that difficult. I mean,
we are getting to the
I've
conclusion
got 2
that this
points
is
to
not a
make.
violation and what our investigation is. I don't think it,
I think we can do it in 1 page.
I agree with the conclusion and simply we vote on that at.
So we basically vote on a letter, and Dr. Means will see it ahead of time.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and all the board members will see it, and it will express, it will take us away from this. It will be an answer to the PSC that will
Will be
end
done.
it. But at the same time, it will acknowledge, a few things.
Yeah, so who would the complaint come to from the PSC?
Oh,
Came to you?
yeah, does that mean I have to write the letter?
Sounds like it.
Well, I don't think so.
No, you
No, you're
I
not.
mean, you can delegate it, you're the
You
president.
just have to sign it.
So if, well, first let's just say, are there any volunteers before I have?
I will.
Okay.
I mean, I take a stab at it, and I'll be glad to work with anybody
And
else.
I can help,
I was gonna say-
because I kind of started,
Great,
I
yes,
saw you
you
jot
should,
it down.
great, right.
So if,
Can we pass it around
Yeah.
and make sure we're all comfortable with it before we vote on it?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
don't nitpick it.
And I
up?
want
Yeah,
Dr. Means
please.
to be right in
Right.
the middle of it.
and I mean, but just keeping the parameters, 1 page is great.
Right,
You know,
1 page.
and sticking to the question, but also addressing these areas. So if, Dr. Dykeman and Greg.
And I
y'all can-
appreciate your explanation on that, because you're exactly right.
If you can get us a draft letter going, and that way we'll have a chance to look at it, and in 2 weeks, we can, take action. And then after that, notify the, PSC.
So draft letter.
And,
That's gonna be to
Mr.
the board
Davis
by when?
and Dr. Dykeman,
2 weeks.
what's an optimal time for you all to have a draft for us by?
In a week.
Okay. So, no later than next
So-
Thursday?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there any other thoughts on this? Okay.
That's right.
So let's move forward with our, 8.2, and that is the original action do wanna open the floor up, but I also want to, you know, maybe offer some suggestions that I don't think this, has to be, drawn out. I will say, and I'm actually trying not to speak on behalf of other people, but I do think I think as a board, we're making some progress. And we're taking some steps to resolve, the issues that exist. Just be it governance or relational issues. And so the action that we take, I will say, I think it can be a variety of different things, but it does not mean that we have to pull apart every aspect of this. To be transparent, I am fully okay with, our board member and leadership, Dr. Means, and our board member continuing to, working to resolve this, issue in a way that is, that they have identified, is helpful for both of them.
Does that happen?
Hmm?
Has there been any discussion about that?
Well, it's not in our place to discuss.
If that's one of the things that we're putting on here, one of the steps forward. So let me just ask this question. As it relates to this particular thing, do we even understand what our responsibilities are as board members to act on something like this?
I think one of the notes that I've taken based on conversations that I've had with, different people at different times, and then going back to an earlier conversation that we had, Dr. Means and I had, actually I think you did as well. One of the quotes that I've jotted down was to consider and address, this ongoing, issue that had not been addressed before. I think consider and address that we determine what consider and address is. And so, I guess, in my mind, I think there have been steps, but, you know, again, we're all sort of speaking outside of, you know, being outside of the situation.
I would just say, to add that I think as a board and working out the norms, I mean, since I've come on the board, it's been pretty obvious that there isn't a lot of agreement among all board members, many of whom are new, about the norms. So we've talked a little bit about the norms and deciding on what the norms are, and that document that was the one that we didn't vote on because nobody had discussed as a full board. It feels like one of our duties as a board in responding to this issue is that we vow to do that work, that we do that norm development work. And that's the whole board. That's not just putting it on the two individuals, it's the full board.
And I'm great with that being the norms. This is a violation of the law, is it not?
No.
And it's also ethics?
No.
Where did I read that? Is it a policy violation?
Our policy violation?
So
That's what I'm asking. What is it that we are addressing?
The
This is
question-
truly an accreditation issue with
We're
accredited.
not talking about the advanced
No,
ed complaint.
this is,
This is 8-2.
yeah, but this came from a letter that was sent from Dr. Means to Jared and you in like June, May, asking to take some kind of action. And then we didn't know about it until he included it in his advanced ed response. So I guess my question is, yeah, what is our responsibility here? Are we still to take action on this thing that should have been done maybe in May or June, but we didn't know about? Or has that been superseded by the advanced ed
I
complaint?
have a different debate. Okay, so this action that we're talking about is exactly the complaint.
It's
to
one of
advance
9.
ed.
It's one of 9.
It's not the complaint to advance ed.
It's not
Exactly, it didn't turn out to be a complaint, it was
Right.
it was a referral to advanced ed, right?
Yes.
Made by Dr. Means, right? And then, so again, that referral was in relation to a violation of, I think it was an ethics policy, I should have looked at that before I came in here. But, where this same board, under a different superintendent, received sanction from advanced ed for this exact same action. And this was the interference with the superintendent's duties. That's what I'm asking about, and that's what this 8.2 is about. Now, is anybody thinking it's about something else? Because y'all are saying things to me that make me think we don't
I
talk about the
understood
same
it's
thing.
exactly what Kara said, that it was a leftover, unresolved email that I wasn't even there, but that some people said they sent out and they didn't get it, and it wasn't obvious to anyone until the advanced ed
Well,
report
and-
that we saw.
And right, and I think that that's probably not totally accurate because we discussed it in executive session.
Mm-mm.
But let's go back, what's accurate is that, again, it's going back to previous leadership, you and the previous president, you all made a decision that this complaint would go forward without having that being discussed with the board, and now here we are. And I remember,
So it's not about the
remember-
complaint, it's about the violation.
Well, violation, but it's the same thing, it doesn't matter what you call it, what we want, but you and the previous president made a decision that you would move forward, that you would, suggest to the superintendent to move forward with the violation. But the entire board, they did not have a part in that discussion.
So,
And so,
this is the executive session part I thought we should have, but we don't have to, but we can talk about it openly, we can talk about it openly.
well, let me just,
Where are we?
but let me just say, like, just like with 8.1, right, we were talking about violations, right? And talking about their, whether this is an ethics violation, of course, we had the direction to investigate, but again,
Well, we don't have the discretion on this one, okay?
well, but going back to when this was an informal, not even before it became a part of this, I think the wish or the desire was that it was addressed. And the words that were used were that it
I just
is
found that.
considered and addressed. And so, in my mind, while it may be a part of something larger, like advanced ed, those types of things, that's outside, that's not what we don't know what they're gonna ask us to do, but this is our attempt to simply address and consider, an informal complaint that was there. And just like with the one before, I feel that it is something that can be, resolved by a plan that is.
So the complaint process is what we're talking about?
So I have the letter here that, it was sent on May 10th to Jared and, Linda, and it was explaining, it says, violation of board policies by Board of Education member, and at the end, it says, it is my belief that the board must take meaningful and decisive action. And so it's asking for the board to do something, to take action, but that is the letter that, the board beyond board leadership didn't know about, nor did we ever talk about. So the first time I knew that we were supposed to take some kind of action was when I read it in the advanced ed complaint, because otherwise I had never seen this letter,
You have not seen the letter.
nor heard anything about taking action on it.
Okay.
And what my point is that now that has become part of something
Right.
larger, I mean, what Dr. Means wrote in his letter is that, this is a symptom of something much larger. So even if we were to resolve tonight, everybody walks away and Dr. Means is pleased, and Dr. Knox is pleased, and we're all pleased, we still have it as part of this ethics violation. That, I mean, this advanced ed complaint. And so,
Well,
I don't see how having and that's why I didn't want to discuss it to begin with, because having that discussion outside of, to just kind of paraphrase what Dr. Means said in here about that he's dealing with a board that acts badly, that's only one example that he put in. So you can do away with the example, he's got plenty others in there. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, without dealing with, like Patricia said, in terms of a whole body of norms and consequences, you know, that are clearly stated, which we don't have.
I get that. I get the norms and the consequences, so I'm not arguing that or disputing that or any of that. I wanna understand what our intent was in trying to address the unaddressed situation, because I got the emails that somehow Jared and I failed to follow through on Dr. Means' complaint to us as the executive committee at that time. And so at this point, it's been, Lakeisha inherited it, it's been communicated to her too, and we were continuing to kick that can down the road and not respond. The purpose for 8.2 was to stop kicking that can down the road.
But that can is now, like, you know how it is
I
when you're
know.
married, when you got all these cans tied together? They're all connected now.
They are.
So that was my question is this something that we still need to address as a separate?
That is what the conversation today
Issue.
should be. Is it something that is separate? Because again, this is a totally different thing from some anonymous person actually filing a complaint. Dr. Means made a referral. This is the referral piece of that. Now, if he included that in all of the other stuff that's out there, then there's just more stuff that's out there. But this was separate.
I guess,
And this is the thing that the board didn't act on.
my thoughts are, whether we address it tonight,
Yeah.
2 months from now, 3 months, 4, at some point, some type of resolution would need to happen. And I feel that, you know, we're adults, there have been some steps toward resolution. It may not mean that resolution has happened, but at the very least, when you're resolving anything, at some point, you're gonna get in a room together and discuss it. So, I guess I'm not understanding that we discuss it and decide how we're gonna consider and address now. And or we do it with the other group of,
Just for clarity, since this is all being done in public, what steps are you referring to that have already been taken?
so I guess I have 2 things in mind.
That have been taken?
And you 2 can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've interpreted, I think both people have been able to articulate their perceptions of what happened. I think that's important, and that was something before. Feeling that there may have been one side out there or one perspective out there and the other one may have been missing. Both perspectives are out there. And then secondly, when we have all participated in begin participating in restorative processes. So I would consider those 2 as steps that are not nothing, because it's different than where we were when this.
Working on norms would be the
And
third.
working on norms.
Working on norms.
And working with the Georgia School Board Association.
Mm-hmm. But those are 2 things that have been completed so far that I feel like in the absence of those things, I think things were getting worse, or at least we couldn't say that we were addressing them in a formal way. That's my perception.
So my perception is that that's awesome, that we are making those strides, and I'm very happy to see that we are moving down that road. But I don't want anybody to sit here and think that we sat on this. The challenge has been, how do you move forward? How do you get people to talk who weren't willing to talk? And so now that we have a process by which we have agreed to have conversations, then there is a possibility that we can put a process in place. But not at one time did anybody drop the ball in terms of trying to resolve this. It takes the cooperation of the people that are involved to make it happen. And so I don't want to hear any more disparaging remarks about what I didn't do or what the former president
I'm
didn't
just
do,
going by
what
the
this
facts.
president do.
Which
In
there
terms
was
of what,
another-
so you can only go by what you're experiencing, but we haven't had a conversation. So it would be nice to talk to me about what's happening before we make those statements. That's what I want to see. So I would ask Dr. Means and I would ask Dr. Knotts if we are comfortable with the present road that we're on in terms of the restorative circles and making progress. And then the PS, or the advanced ed people, the new name, I keep forgetting, they will make decisions on whether or not we have done our due diligence in resolving our internal complaints. Constraints. I'm good with that.
I would prefer, that's why I made the recommendation at the beginning of the meeting 3.5 hours ago, to try to settle these issues in a different format, in a different way. I think it was Dr. Maddox who made the statement, this is a distraction to the work of addressing our achievement issues in the district. So I've made the commitment to engage in a restorative process with Dr. Knotts. I will continue to do so. I think that it's apparent to me now that what I assumed board members would consider to be norms is probably not where everyone on this board currently sits. And so I think it will be helpful to go through the process with GSBA and to establish norms. But I'm willing to go through that process in the name of allowing us not to get distracted anymore and to focus on the work for children.
Just to be, I was just gonna ask, so in your opinion, this is not something that the board needs to do anything with, right?
Not right now. I would prefer to continue the process of, Dr. Gann has used the terminology of, we're trying to resolve relationship issues through formalized processes. And you only do that if there are no other avenues to resolve things. I believe enough tension and distraction and negativity has descended on our district and on this governance team. It is draining, and it's just a distraction. And while there may be external factors and external parties that feed off of the negativity and feed off of the tension and the infighting, I'm not interested in that type of world. I just simply want to serve the kids in this district in my role as superintendent. It's been a significant distraction and an emotional drain on not only me personally, but our team. And so I am committed to going through a restorative process with Dr. Knotts to see if we can resolve these issues in an informal way versus going through what 8.2 identifies.
Dr. Knotts.
I volunteered to participate in restorative justice meeting, and I'm happy to share with the board my communication with Danny Malik and John Lash about that.
I'm not sure that answers it for me, but I appreciate that response. And again, process-wise, I'm happy with what you said, Kara. It kind of brings us to a closure to a point, at least from Dr. Dean's perspective. I think I'm understanding. I can't interpret anything that you said. You said you're willing to share with us, with Danny, and what you
Communication, I
share
have
with
it,
them.
yes.
But the question is, are you reciprocating what Dr. Means is saying? Are you on the receiving end on that?
I have been very open about participating in restorative justice
Okay.
efforts, and I think I have to stop at that point, as far as my response.
That always leaves me not knowing. But I appreciate you sharing.
I'm
Thank you.
happy to share things another time.
So then if, and I'm pushing it because I brought this to this agenda and I want to leave it, obviously, I want to close it. So if we're going to go forward with the assumption that this is going to work for us to build our capacity as board members and our skills as board members, then I am willing to continue, I'll support Dr. Means' position in trying to work through the processes with GSBA and the restorative processes, but that does take the cooperation of all of us. And so if we're not able to commit to that, then I'm not sure how we get this off this calendar. Did I hear that, or did I not hear that?
You didn't hear what he said. I think he said he's committed to restorative justice. So, that's what he said.
Is that our path forward? I'm going to
now.
listen to that for now. All right,
And I
I'm
think,
good.
if I can reiterate what I heard the GSBA folks say, is that at every district across this state, they define this micromanagement or this interaction between the board and the superintendent differently. Every single district, she said, defines these differently, but we have to define it as a board. And that's a process we have to do the work for.
I agree.
And we need to do that as soon as possible.
And I said that since, what, May, whenever he came on board as president, since January. So for a year now, we've been trying to get this board to do that. And you're the fifth board now, so hopefully
We
we'll
now
actually
have-
get there.
we
And it's
now-
almost December. So yeah, I want us to do it. And so I'm grateful for the commitment to go forward. But I think it's also important for us to at least know what our role is as board members so that we don't interfere with the daily operations of the district, because again, the history of this board, I wasn't here when either lawsuit happened, but we have done two things that are putting us at great risk in our behavior, and I want us to be conscious of those, and Charles reminds us of them regularly, so I don't have to repeat them.
But I do agree that once we have the norms in place, I think that will help to resolve a lot of that. That's a big part of it, not having norms, just walking into a board, the board operate differently. So I think once we have norms in place, that would be a great first step.
And so it sounds like the movement forward, and I don't know, is continue to work with our, on our norms, our GSBA, professional development, as well as the restorative work. That those are steps that we've identified as being committed to making.
Just as an announcement, there is a free webinar on November 14th through GSBA at 11:30 on developing board norms and protocols.
I mean, it's not gonna do it for us, but it's free. It says it's free.
Yeah, but if somebody signs up for it, they'll send it to you, you can read it yourself, you can share with it.
Oh, I see. All right, well, I may.
So there, at 8.2, these other items, are we, any other questions, concerns about where we're moving with this?
We have one last left over.
I just wanted to make a point of clarification. With regard to this complaint, I would have been more comfortable, since this was in public, if it had been referred to as alleged violations.
Okay.
I think there was an assumption of guilt.
And I apologize for that assumption. It was what was stated to me. So I took it that way. You're right, I didn't hear the other part.
And that is something that I told Keisha yesterday. This is the one of what Dr. Means' points that he's given us as evidence in the advanced ed complaint that was between two people. And I mean, I'm in this complaint, but everything that I'm in there for is like out there. So there's no, you know, it wasn't a private conversation between two people, and you know, where no witnesses was. I mean, so that all the other concerns that Dr. Means expressed in here, by way of example, are pretty well documented.
And so I'll say this about that one's in writing. And so that's why I didn't call it alleged. It
Well,
was in writing.
but his response,
Yeah.
his thing is in writing too, and it was at the time. And Dr. Knox talked to folks right after the meeting and gave an explanation. Dr. Means left that meeting and gave the explanation to our board officers. So, I mean, you know, so you got doctor, you know, and I don't know, Linda, you know.
And we may not resolve, we won't resolve that, your point is
And that's my
taken.
point, I don't think we ever can.
We, you know, and Dr. Knox, your point is taken. I do think we have some movement with our GSBA restorative practices grant. And so when it goes back to this letter, and then also the request that this situation is considered and addressed, again, these are concrete things that we can point to as a board, steps that we are committed to taking.
I call for adjournment and executive session, can we do
Let me make the motion. I recommend an executive session for the following reasons. The appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, dismissal, or evaluation of employees. There, second. Second. Any discussion, all in favor?
5-minute health break.
Aye.
And where would that be?
In the yoga room,
Is there a yoga room?
I could use yoga.